And I think every person has a unique impact that they need to make on the world.
Definitely.
But if you diminish that, that's just on you.
Meet Christine Strutt. She is an expert in intellectual property law, specialising in helping businesses protect and commercialise their IP assets. With a unique blend of creativity and commercial insight, she shares her insights on success, presence, and the evolving digital landscape, guiding us through her journey of innovation and impact.
I want to go into the technical stuff
Yes.
for a bit. The first question would be, how does this individual know that they have to go and register a patent for their tech?
I think that's kind of a big warning for funders. Another big one people don't realize is
Christine, what drives you and why do you do the work that you do?
well, that's a loaded question to start with, Naison, isn't it?
Welcome.
Let's just dive right in. I think what drives me is the sense of building things, doing something that wasn't necessarily there before, because it gives you a chance to do something a little bit different. It allows you to apply creativity, but in a very sort of productive, useful way. And I think IP is uniquely placed in providing me a platform to really sustain that sort of drive or that passion. I remember when I was at school, there was this big hype about doing, personality tests or aptitude tests and testing your brain, So we were told people with left brain dominance were sort of the logical people, and the people with right brain dominance were all creative. And we all did this test at school. And the researchers from the university that came over, they were so fascinated because for some reason my dot of where my dominant section lies was very close to the middle. So interestingly, there's also an audio-visual distinction, top or bottom, and then there's left or right brain. And I got sort of researched a little bit more because it was unusual to have someone so close to the middle. And initially I thought, well, this is a bit like a superpower, right? But like any superpower, if you don't identify it and you don't channel it correctly, it's a bit of an inconvenience. And it's very lonely because when you're hanging out with people who are just logical and, efficient and organized, you're always a little bit too out there, too creative, or you're thinking otherwise. And they go, why are you like this?
Mm-hmm.
This is how it's done. And you say, well, we could do it differently. But simultaneously, when you're then hanging out with very creative people, you're always too pragmatic. You're always too logical. You're always the one saying, oh, we could be a bit more efficient here. Do we have to be so intense? Can't we just do this or maybe commercialize it a bit, make some money? So you're not really a good fit on that side either. And so for me, I think I struggled to say, but where do you use this ability? And I think my path leading into the world of IP law was the biggest blessing, because it really is the perfect space to be strategic and commercially minded, to think about economic factors, but also appreciate creativity and nuance and subtlety and, human contexts and, environments that you're in. So I think my biggest gift was really finding that space and a career that stimulates that, because ultimately we're all just trying to live out our values, whether you've named them or not. And I think the work that I do is just perfectly aligned with things that I value and that make me happy.
Interesting. So I know we spoke about this before we started rolling. You spoke about values being, or we try to live out our values in the workplace. So for me, I see values as like the guardrail right? Even though, I mean, I would like to think that we put some effort to understand what our values are. And, that could just be like taking a quick reflection and being like, oh, cool, I went to the gym today, so I value health. Now, that becomes tricky if that gym example, you want to take your values and go into the workplace, but you don't really know how to kind of monetize it or how you're going to make a living off just, living your values, if that makes sense. So someone in their, early 20s who understands what they enjoy, understands their values, what would you advise that person to now, take those values and try to make a living off it, or, a career out of it?
So I think that's the difference for me. You see the values as the guardrails. I see it as the fuel. It's the petrol. It's always there driving you, whether you know what it is or not. I think it's mature and wise to try to figure out what it is and to be honest with yourself. But that will always drive you. So if you are a person who values health, well, that's a value. But to me, the goal is then being healthy by going to the gym. There's sort of, the purpose of going to the gym is being healthy. But there's a value behind it. And if you ask, well, why do I want to be healthy? You'll probably find that you want to say, because. And someone once taught me, if you ask yourself why 7 times, you're going to get to the real value of why you're doing something. And you might find that there's a reason or an underlying condition that's much more significant than just being healthy and looking good. And that's why you're actually applying that discipline and doing it. So I see the value as the fuel. And some people can run on other people's values, or they've been taught this is a good thing to pursue. And they believe, oh, that's my value. But if it's not really, you'll never feel fulfilled. You'll never be optimizing yourself. And you'll always be diminishing your impact on the world around you. And I think every person has a unique impact that they need to make on the world.
Definitely.
But if you diminish that, that's just on you. And of course, we have circumstances and there's challenges, and we all get given different chances and opportunities or different environments. But even in that, the way you react to that and the way you respond to the world, I think that speaks to your value system. And so for me, it's really, really digging in there and trying to figure out, but what is the driver? What's the fuel? And am I in a place where the fuel is really driving me in the right direction in the fastest way possible? Or am I in a place where this isn't really given space to ignite, if that makes sense?
Definitely. And you spoke about, the drive and the why. Do you think that if you know your why and you know what drives you and you're actually living it out, does that then lead to fulfillment?
I can't tell you. I think we're all trying to find fulfillment. But what I will say is, to me, success is really just resilience and good fortune, right? There's no success without good fortune. And that good fortune, or good luck, if you will, that could be good timing. It could be good people. It could be a good opportunity, of course. It could be a good structural support, whether it's financial or some other structure in your life. But that sort of good fortune, that's one element. The other is resilience. Success, to me, I often think, is just successive chances. It's successive tries, successive trials, successive pursuits, or successive adjustments in your business. And if that resilience, if you can keep that up, the good fortune will come. I'm a big fan of the movie. This name's gonna slip now. Never-Ending Story. Okay, so it's actually a German book originally, but if you care to just watch the movie, it's good enough. And they've got this concept of, going through tests in life and being resilient to those tests. But then when you really get stuck, having the luck dragon arrive. And they talk about how everyone in their life, at some junctures, you need a luck dragon. So I think to me, success is that resilience to keep going till the luck dragon comes. And he'll come at one point. But the values drive that. You don't want to be successful in something that's not you and doesn't meet that sort of inside feeling, that thing that you know, but you can't really, clone it or have it explained to other people, but you know what you value on the inside, right? And I just think when you do then meet the luck dragon or the success happens, you're either going to feel completely fulfilled and happy because it really was you and it's your value system that's being recognized, or it will be just an empty Pyrrhic victory. You'll achieve something, but you won't feel it because it's not yours. It's not what you wanted. It's not what you value. So you won't feel any ownership or attachment to that. And I think that's the sad thing. Some people are successful. Some people are talented. But unless they can marry that with their value system and who they are, and their identity and their unique, gifts, their unique attributes, I don't think they ever feel their life. And that's why nowadays there's such talk about the crisis of presence. I think Rich Roll calls it, we have a crisis of presence. We are on our devices, we are rushed, we are reactive to all the messages and emails and texts and videos and media that we're creating, that we're not present. We are not having proper conversations. We are not fully in the moment. We are with our kids, but we're on our phones the whole time. We're just not present. And I think that's firstly spurred a big economy for conjuring up some form of presence, whether it's exercise, meditation. People talk a lot about it on podcasts, but being really real in the moment, in the now, it's what a lot of people are talking about, right? But if you take it back historically, even in religious texts, they talk about the bread of presence. So for you to really come into contact with your higher self or a higher being, God, whatever energy you want to, identify with, you need the bread of presence to sustain and nurture that wholeness and that being alive. So I think when I talk about values, that's what I'm talking about. Not just your purpose and your pursuits, but what's the driving force and what's going to make you feel present and alive and true to who you are, regardless of what happens in your life or what you achieve.
Twofold question. The first is, why are we so distracted? And the second is, what's the value of being present?
I feel the second question, I'll answer it first. I think the value of being present is not missing out on your life. For myself, I've noticed I'm a very efficient person. I love things that are just efficient and they work, and I optimize things that are not efficient in my life. And in our kind of business, there's a bit of tension between having efficient systems and getting your work done, because as a lawyer and a business owner, you are working on your business all the time, but you also have to work in it because you also have clients. You also have to do legal work. So you want to be most efficient in that. But you also have people. So you're managing relationships. You might be mentoring people. You have colleagues or staff, perhaps. And there's a bit of a tension there because let's say I'm working on a piece of work for a client. Remember, I want to be efficient because in some cases you're billing by the hour. So you want some focus time. And someone knocks at your door and they go, "Do you have a minute?" And it is just the worst question in the world for someone who's performance driven, because you know it's not going to be a minute. You know your emotional state's going to change. And I think in my younger days, I was quite dismissive of that person because I really wanted to just get things done fast and, efficiently. And now that I'm older and I think there's more people in our business, I've realized the importance of balancing your efficiency with being in that moment and saying to the person, come in, sit down, stop what you're doing. Honoring that relationship, honoring that person, that interaction, and really being there, listening to them, responding, not distracted, sort of looking at your timesheet, going, oh, this minute is going on for a while. That's important too. And what I realized was the times I was being efficient, those are not the times that I feel fulfilled. Those are not the times that I feel included. I don't belong anywhere. The relationships you've built with people, when they achieve success, or when they grow, or when they have a personal victory, or the business flourishes because of something someone else did, that is fulfilling. That creates a sense of belonging. Those are the moments when you're present. That's what you remember. And that's when you're mostly alive. And I think that's been a huge learning lesson for me, to say, it's not all just efficiencies. You do also need to be alive and nurture relationships and the people in your life. So that's the second part of your question. That's being present for me, is giving due attention to every moment. Because the quality of any moment is really just the quality of the attention that you're giving to that moment. And that's actually very empowering, because it means you drive the quality of your life. Regardless of where you are, you can decide the quality of the attention you give something, which means you decide the quality of your day. And the first part of your question is, why are we so distracted? I think that's a combination of biological factors. I think it's social engineering. I think tech is specifically built to keep us distracted. I think the education system is built to keep us distracted and follow rules. And I think governments want you to be distracted and follow certain systems and rules, because that's how you manage large groups of people. So I think we are distracted voluntarily. I don't think anyone's forcing this on you, but I think our world is engineered for you to not have to think and discern and ask questions. I was very lucky. I was at a school which very much valued critical thinking. And so you were able to ask why at any point. You weren't encouraged to complain about something. If the why didn't have a satisfactory answer, the challenge was, how do you make it better? What's the solution here? And how can you respectfully make that change happen? I think that is what we need to be coaching young people today, because with AI and tech being able to do a lot of analysis and program routine tasks for us, the real skill is not how to just enact a process. The real skill is discernment and judgment. So for instance, in our line of work, it's not being able to file the patent or the trademark. The AI will definitely do that soon. The challenge here is to contextualize the client's problem, look around the corner, and advise them with a whole bunch of factors that the AI cannot appreciate at the moment. And how do we teach that? How do we teach a new generation who have all these tools? And how do we teach them to not be over-reliant on those tools? How do we teach them to just think? It's a challenge. It's not so easy because you have to master it yourself first. It's much easier to just go with the flow, go with the tech. It's what Google says.
And use the tech.
Of course, it's easier. I'm not saying you mustn't use the tech. I think you must think what's behind the tech. Why does it give me this answer? And if you cannot learn to understand that, that's an alarm bell for me. And a lot of people are keen on AI. They don't know how it's coaching itself. They don't even know what it's coaching itself on. And then they're surprised when they have to shut it down because of some bias or some offensive trends when it teaches itself. And isn't that interesting how it's just a lot of the AI systems that have been shut down just reflected our own worst parts, because it was training itself on information structures, platforms that we as humans created, right?
Subjective information.
Subjective, there was a bias built in already, and how the AI responds to that. And when we see it from the outside, we go, oh no, that's terrible. Shut it down. This is not good. But it's really just a reflection of the digital world that we've built, isn't it? So I think this is going to be a big challenge in the high-tech season of humanity, is just remaining high touch. A lot of people say that, and keeping that balance of having a life that is lived and felt. And I think also being able to discern and exercise your own judgment despite what the tool or the app is suggesting for you. And they will make it sound personalized, but it will all be the algorithm deciding. And at some point, you still have to decide. You'll make decisions for yourself. Isn't it the irony that now that you have the internet, you are expected to make more decisions for yourself in a way? So if you go to the doctor, how many of us just listen to the doctor? How many of us Google the symptoms beforehand, and sometimes even after you've seen the doctor, and you make your own conclusion, right? And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Use the information, but always be a little bit skeptical of it, and then still learn to assess it for yourself and make a decision that's informed, but also somewhat, informed by your gut. Because the AI doesn't have gut. It has a brain. It doesn't have gut. It doesn't have that feeling yet. And as humans, I think we have that intuition. We have that gut. And don't let that die because you're just reactive and distracted and going with the flow on your tech.
You spoke about taking responsibility a bit earlier on. So I think that if individuals take more responsibility for their life, one, we could achieve everything that we want to achieve, and two, we'd be much more fulfilled and happy. But the question becomes, how do you then take responsibility for everything in your life, not just work, but your relationships? Any arguments that you're in with a partner, assume responsibility, even though that may be difficult, even though you want to get your point across. How do you, in those situations, assume responsibility?
I don't know that I have the golden nugget that you're looking for, but I think in certain structures, we don't want to take responsibility because it's hard. It's unpleasant. If I want to take responsibility of my life and be an entrepreneur, that also means I have to take agency over everything I do. People work for big businesses because it's safer. You know the deal. You show up a certain way and you get rewarded a certain way. So there's some things you don't like about it. Maybe you don't like the dress code or the work hours or the traffic, but you put up with it because you don't have to then worry about other things. And I think taking responsibility or agency is actually not something everyone wants to do. They don't want that freedom. They don't want that responsibility because it's hard and it's risky and it's scary, because when it doesn't work out, that's also on you, isn't it? If it works out, it might just give you more responsibility, which is then even more scary. In relationships, I don't know that that's my forte at all. But what I have learned, and we were discussing different generations the other day, but I think our generation were coached a certain way. It was about you, it was performance driven, it was about winning, it was about your purpose. We mentioned that earlier. And it was sort of fed to you. This is how it works. And so even if you did sort of a exercise reflecting on yourself, it was always about what's your personality makeup, what's your traits, what's your gifts, your values. I think the new generations are saying, what are those things for other people around me? So I'm a big fan of this thing called the Enneagram. And the main reason is some personalities, like mine, we can go through life believing, well, everyone needs to think like me. I mean, how could you not? It makes absolute sense, right? And learning that there are other types that that really just genuinely do not experience the world like you do. And being humble and willing to learn that and see it and say, you know what, this is how this person is experiencing this situation, which is very different to me. And I think that responsibility to educate yourself on how other people function and react to things can make you a better citizen, definitely a better leader, a better friend, a better spouse, better parent. But it's not about just understanding yourself. It's being curious about other people and how they are experiencing life and then responding to that. A very practical example, in my immediate team, we have myself and one other person have a very similar personality profile. And then there's someone else who has a different one, who's more of a helper. Ours is obviously, as I said, efficiency, performance driven. And then we have someone who, they just like things to be perfect. They optimize, but in a way that makes things just. And you can recognize that there's 3 different gifts there, right? And they're all important. Neither one is more important than the other. But let's say we have a project and we deliver it. For myself and the one person that are efficiency, performance driven, there's nothing better than doing a post-mortem on our own work and going, where could I have been better? I could have done this. I could have been faster. Next time I'll price it this way. I'm going to have a template. I'm going to get a team of people to do this, like robots. Like we're engineering, but we're most critical of ourselves. Now, in the same conversation, you have the helper who's getting the same feedback, but they're not getting excited about the performance efficiencies aspect. They're hearing, I didn't help enough. They were not happy with the deliverable. I didn't help enough. I should have supported them more. So the third person is saying, I thought I delivered a really good work product. And my team leader is saying it wasn't good enough. We can do better. So how the same feedback is landing so dramatically different on 3 team members who are all very close-knit, all get on very well, have known each other for years, but the same piece of information, the same discussion is landing vastly different on each one of those people. And I learned that managing people. And it was not just about knowing how I operate and how I want to review my work. It's about how do they experience that? How do I give feedback and say, listen, with the time we had, this was the most efficient way of doing it. Well done. Next time, if we have less time, this is maybe an idea. So the performance guy is happy. To say thank you to the person who wants to be a helping hand. To them, a thank you means more than a high five or a well done. They want to be appreciated. They want to be thanked. They want to be included and belong to that team. The guy wants it perfect, to say to him, do you know what? Without your inputs, we would have missed a few marks. You dotting the I's, crossing the T's, keeping us all in check. That was what made this a success. How do we get your high standard into the next project whilst also being faster, right? It's talking to them in their language and to their hearts. And I think that's how you get a high performance team. It's not assuming everyone is built like you and the way you lead the team is the right way because they must all respond the way you would if you were a team member. And I think that comes from running a business that's kind of grown over the last 2 decades, from about 10 people to about 140 people. We at Van Seidels have 4 different offices across Africa now. So there are a lot of cultural differences, different location challenges when it comes to the different offices. There's obviously legal nuances with the different IP registries. It's different markets. So even the same client can have a different experience in different countries or jurisdictions. And being sensitive to that and not just saying, this is how the world works. I think that's responsible, is educating yourself about other people as well as about yourself and your blind spots maybe. Also your talents, but look at what you are not seeing and look at how other people are experiencing things around you.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a one size fits all. And you touch on something that's so important there, which is how to effectively manage a team, and also the principles on not just managing a team, but managing high performers and, that individuals that produce results. And what I took from that is like a few things. The first is, firstly, everyone should get a personality test so that you can understand people better. But I agree with you, it's a cool framework to understand people. And then the second thing you touched on is people like to receive feedback in a different way. And it's understanding how that person likes to receive that feedback so that they can improve. And of course, so that you can effectively lead that person. What other things am I missing out when it comes to like managing this high performance team and actually getting the most out of your team?
Do you know, you've actually made me realize something asking that question. We assume some people are high performance people and others are not. It could be that a high performance team is just one that is stimulated and managed in the best way. And in our business, we have very different business sections. They're not really verticals because they're all integrated, but you would have an enforcement team. Those are litigators, people who fight for things. They follow systems. They really have to be very precise, very clear, very decisive about their advice and how they pursue a case. You've got people like me who's just not litigators. We are not fighters. We are fixers. There's a story in how that came about. But we look at things a little bit different. Then you've got people who are doing raids, anti-counterfeiting work, and they have to deal with police and brand owners and warehouses and destroying things, and they have to bill in a different way. You've got patent people who can sit for hours and draft a new invention, the description of it, which is also a different mindset. So all of these people are high performance, right? But you can already tell they need a different space to operate in. It's that old story of, a fish will not be talented if it's supposed to ride a bike. So you have to get the right environment. That's important. And I think you have to set up the right team leaders for the different environments. So when we started the firm, I was initially managing everything that was not patent or design related. And that was copyright, trademarks. As the firm grew, of course, we had to get more partners on board because you can't just keep managing all the different sections. And we do have now. But just before the pandemic, we decided that I would transition to a different role. And one of our partners, she would take on the management of the existing team, which was still growing a lot. And I would look at the sort of external relations, BD, the data that really fuels our business. And so it's a better fit for me, definitely. But when you're an entrepreneur, you do what you have to do, right? You have to wear a lot of hats. There's no choice. But then when you become an established business and you realize in your business, in our case, in the partnership, there are different people with different leadership styles, different talents, and it forms a team. I love the American football concept because you do need the team manager that kind of has to run things and decide things and hire people and all that. And he takes it with input from the team, but he decides. And you've got your quarterback who is to say this direction or that direction and kind of decide the play on the field and see what's happening that the manager doesn't necessarily see because he's not in the game. And then you've got your blockers and you've got all sorts of different roles. But not one of those roles can be all of the roles. The team manager cannot be the quarterback simultaneously. The quarterback can't be the blocker. You need all the different roles. And so I think effective leadership is setting up the different roles so that people can flourish in different spaces and work. I think that's how the modern workplace is. Smaller teams where people can feel seen and heard, and they can operate in a space that is optimum for them. Now after the pandemic, some people want to work at home. Some people want to work in the office. Some people think one way, but it's not really healthy for them. So they need their team leader to say, you know what, you need to actually come to the office twice a week because we miss you and we care about you. And you in your pajamas for 5 days a week is not healthy. It's not a good thing. So you need to be seen, but you also need to be heard and valued. So I think smaller teams are better for that. I think 8 to 10 people is a maximum because you can't really be intimately involved in more people's lives than that. And I think recognizing where your skills are. I think I am better suited to driving something new. And in IP, that would be new markets, or it would be new forms of IP, new business ventures. I think my colleague who manages our team at the moment is better suited to running the group every day, having the meetings, having the check-ins, making sure the courier is on time. Those things are very, very important in our business, but those are two different roles, and the quarterback and the team manager is not the same person. And we need to complement each other and recognize there are roles here. Even in terms of the leadership of the company, you can have someone who's really good at crisis management. So again, pandemic time, perfection. Because within 24 hours, our managing partner had laptops for everyone. He had already called this lockdown before it happened. People were looked after, their care packages were delivered. We had even people's chairs taken to their homes so that they wouldn't, get back problems over the next few years. There was really a sense of look after people, care for our people, business will run. We're lucky that we work in sectors that were not badly affected. So obviously some forms of tech and healthcare flourished in that time. And those are two areas where our business is, very strong. But then post-pandemic, and I admire our managing partner for doing this self-reflection. You no longer need a crisis manager who makes decisions on the whim. You have more space to do due diligence. You have more space and time to make decisions with advice, with insight, with some research. And so that's a different kind of leadership, isn't it? And I think businesses would benefit from not expecting all of those facets from one person. And being a partnership as opposed to a company, we have that in place. We have complementary leadership styles. So whatever season hits the business, one of the voices can speak up and we can all make the decision. We often say in our partnership, we've never voted on anything. We work through it, and all the decisions are pretty much unanimous by the time we get to the decision. And we've said many times, the smartest person in the room is the room. And you might have something in mind that you want to do, but I promise you, if you put it to the room, you'll walk out of there with a slightly revised version that's even better.
You also touched on something I think is so important, which is take care of your people and they will take care of your business. And that, for me, at the fundamental of any successful business is a healthy culture with happy and full and joyful people. What has been the key to your longevity in the firm thus far?
It's odd. I think I've been there for about 15 or 16 years now. And I only just fall in the millennial generation. I think I'm on the cusp, right? So I don't fully associate with being a millennial. But I think one thing that is odd is for anyone of my age to be in the same job, leaving university right up until now. And the easy answer to that is that I haven't been in the same job for 15 years. I joined a startup. IP back then was plain packaging. It was, copyright infringements in books, photocopying, educational handbook, that's that kind of thing. And then it went into sort of Web 2.0. So you had social media, the valuation of tech companies' IP, and that's what I did my master's on. So that's a very different way of looking at IP. And of course, the business was much bigger. So we were managing a bigger group of people. Next section, we opened offices in Africa. So we have an office in Nigeria. We have an office in Cameroon that services regional sector of Africa called Awapi. It's sort of the French-speaking countries have combined their IP platform. And then we've got offices in Namibia, which runs our other regional hub called a repo. So that's sort of a Western English-speaking part of Africa. And it's too early to say it publicly, but we are soon to be announcing another massive office opening in Africa, in another African country. And it will speak to our involvement in tech hubs and sort of high-tech zones like we have here in Stellenbosch and Cape Town. So we're all very excited about that. But again, having a multi-office business, and now your IP issues are more related to influencers, and every litigation opinion you have to consider public relations, or how is this going to look if my client sues a smaller brand or business owner? Do they look like a bully? Is this going to come back and haunt them on the internet? You're looking at domain name infringements. You're looking at fraud and people, taking your internet traffic and misdirecting it. So that's a new phase of IP. And now currently we're in the phase of machine learning and AI and NFTs and blockchain and smart contracts. So you can see this is a vastly different business than the one I joined initially. Mm. And so for me, being able to be entrepreneurial has been the saving grace, or that's kind of something that if that ever changed, that would be a deal breaker for me. If you gave me a glass ceiling and said, this is what's expected of you and nothing more, I'm out. And the people who are my partners in the business, they know this. So I think I have earned some credibility over the years where if I want to try something, they let me. Not everything works. And people have to have grace for that as well. And I think, though, that the ability to try new things, that's what's been keeping me interested. And the fact that the business has evolved so much presents new challenges every year. So that's kind of the answer. Mm. Same brand, but very different business, very different IP landscape that you're working in. And that's actually in a fairly short space of time if you think it's 15 years. Mm.
I want to go into the technical stuff for a bit. So I know that when it comes to IP, it's very broad in terms of what falls under IP, but let's use a use case of an early stage founder who has developed this tech, and let's say, for example, the tech happens to be in fintech. So the first question would be, how does this individual know that they have to go and now register a patent for their tech, and where should this person start?
Wow, I'd hope that they'd have that awareness purely because it's become so much more common. I think when I started working and you mentioned intellectual property, people assumed it was physical properties that ask you about real estate, and as you know, that's not what we do at all. I think the general awareness has grown. People, because we are online, we appreciate there are intangible things that drive tangible value and tangible business outcomes. And I think a lot of founders nowadays at least know that they have a logo or a brand. They might be surprised to know that, well, your user interface is also your brand, or the design of your shop, the space, the look and feel of that is also part of your brand, right? But at least they'll know, I have a brand. I have a name of my business. I have to register a company, but I probably have to do a trademark as well. I think a lot of people are very alive to copyright. So they know I've coded something and there must be a value in here, right? Even if they don't know immediately it's copyright, there's something that I've built here. Mm-hmm. Some people know about patents, usually if they come from an engineering background or some technical or, there are a lot of pharmacists or chemical specialists that they know about patents. And that's actually the only one that you really have to do before you disclose it to the public. Because for a patent to be registered, it has to be novel worldwide. It also has to be not obvious. So I think there's a third criteria, which is, it has to have an industrial application, but nowadays Of course it has. Otherwise, you wouldn't be spending money to protect it. So for some industries, patents are fantastic, gives you a 20-year monopoly. The deal is sort of, I disclose my technology or my innovation to better society. And after 20 years, it's going to become part of the public domain. Anyone can use it or build on it and improve it even further. But in exchange for that knowledge being shared, I get 20 years exclusivity. So I get to get royalties or shut down people that are copying my invention. Remember, it can be the product or the method of how you get to that product. Both of those are patent subject matter. So in some industries, like in software, you could get it. There's a myth that you cannot patent software. It's not exactly right. The application of the software definitely can be patented. And we do a lot of software patents, if you want to call them that way. But you want to ask yourself, is this software not going to evolve in the next 2 or 3 years? Because then 20 years is a long run, right? And it might not be worth it. You might then get the patent for funding purposes or negotiations or a defensive mechanism to protect you from someone else claiming that you're infringing, right? So there's many reasons you would go get the patent, which isn't solely licensing or protecting your invention. But that's the only one you need to file before you put it to a public audience, which could be a academic institution who reviews it. It could be a Indaba or some sort of promotion somewhere. You could talk about it on your podcast, and now it's not novel anymore, right? So you've ruined your own novelty. And I think that's kind of a big warning for funders. Another big one people don't realize is the copyright that is generated by a third party for any works that go into your business. That doesn't belong to you until it is actually assigned over to you. So copyright, you don't need to register it in South Africa. The minute a work is created, whether it's a written work, artistic work, music, software, the minute it's created, it belongs to the author. Unless that's his job, so you're within the course and scope of your employment, obviously it belongs to the business then, so that's what you're paid to do. But if it's outside of your job spec or you're an independent contractor, that's your IP. And because it's not a tangible thing, I can't hand over possession. So if I give you a painting, you own the painting, but you don't own the copyright in my painting, right? So for that aspect to transfer, we do need a written agreement, and that agreement has to be signed by the person who's handing over the copyright. Now that's something founders have to understand. Get that in place before there's a problem, and get it in place before that copyright work becomes very valuable. Because firstly, you don't want to be trying to enforce copyright and the third party says, well, show me the chain of title. Like, do you own this? And then you can't prove it. Okay, that's the first risk. But in terms of value, if it becomes more valuable and you then approach the author to take ownership, they'll say, well, this is now worth a lot more, right? So the price increases, the negotiation friction changes. Get these things up front. You don't need it for every single piece of work. But let's say you are instructing an ad agency. Get the copyright assignment in place for all the works they're going to produce for your business into the future. Plain and simple. Their standard contract might even contain a clause like that. But it is important that it's signed. It can't just be an email saying, oh, this is how we understand it will work. So those are 3 main areas of copyright. There's also designs, which is the way something looks. And often that's a nice way of getting a registration for something with a novel aspect. That novel aspect might become a trademark. So let's say you have a very interesting looking shoe, let's say a Croc, for instance. Now, Crocs is very unique looking. It would definitely be a design because there was no shoe like that prior. And over time, we look at the shoe and we definitely associate it with only one brand. So the shoe itself becomes the trademark. Got you. So when I first filed or created the shoe, it probably wasn't a trademark because consumers don't identify it with that product. But now that consumers do, it's definitely a trademark. And the trademark lasts forever. You renew it every 10 years, it lasts forever. Look, so does the copyright, but designs and patents expire after a while. So it's kind of an interim protection until it expires. And then with a design, your trademark can maybe then take over from there. And then I want to talk about sort of forms of IP that people don't think about. These are either non-traditional brands, so movement marks, the way something moves or the sound it makes. So the sound of a Harley Davidson, for instance, or the layout of your shop. So an iStore, you all know what an iStore looks like. So that's a registered design in many countries. You have anything that is distinctive and unusual can be a brand, but then you also have things like know-how. Now, as you build your business, there are things you learn that makes you quicker or better than your competitors. That's know-how. And it is a form of IP that you can put a value on. There's also something called trade secrets. So a trade secret comes into being when it is actually a secret and you're making an effort to protect the secret. So I can't just say I have a trade secret, but everyone in my business knows about it, right? It has to be something that's actually protected, either through contracts or you limit access to it. And that's a form of IP. So I was recently in Atlanta and I was lucky enough to go to the actual safe where they keep the Coca-Cola formula. So do you know this urban legend about, the Coca-Cola recipe? And I just thought, this is just a massive PR campaign. This is not real. But as it turns out, no, it is a real thing. And basically why it's a secret is there's 3 parts to the formulation or how you make it, the process. And if you're involved in one of the parts, you don't know the other 2 parts. So even the locked thing that it's kept in needs multiple people to open it. But the original one has 3 sides because people could only peek in and see their part of the recipe. The other classic example, of course, is, the spices in your KFC batter. Now, I don't know if that is really as protected, but that would be sort of a very common analogy of a trade secret. So there are these other forms of IP. Goodwill, the attractive force in your business and your brand, that can be a valuable asset. And remember that your IP is not just an insurance policy against people copying you. It's making a tangible asset out of something intangible. So the registration or how you deal with it gives you a tangible asset on your balance sheet. You can take out loans against it. You can license it. You can use that value in ways that people don't often think about. So it's not just about ticking boxes and having your IP in place. It's about exploiting it and commercializing it in the best way possible.
And I know that trademarks are evolving now. Cristiano Ronaldo and his celebration.
Yes, that's a gesture mark.
A gesture mark. Mbappe and his celebration. So is the purpose of having that as their IP just purely commercialization, or why would they and what should other individuals with personal brands be looking at and thinking about when it comes to their own personal IP?
I think for the gesture marks, there's a large element of commercialization, of course. But the origin of trademarks is not actually for the business. It's actually to protect the consumer. So back in the day, you would walk down the street and buy a leather shoe from a shoemaker. And if he had no markings on it, you'd wear it out and let's say the lace broke or the leather was of an inferior quality. Without a marking on it, there's no reason he has to fix it, right? Because it's not his problem. So they started putting markings on things and they were both saying this is an authentic shoe, but also I promise the quality of the shoe, right? The consumer is not confused about whose shoe he's wearing. And so when something happens to the product, he can take it back there because it's got your mark of authenticity and quality on it, and you've made the promise. And that is what a brand is. A brand is a form of consumer protection, and it's a form of authenticity and quality. And that's why it's got such an interesting application in the digital world and with new forms of authentication and showing title. So, luxury goods nowadays, you have NFTs embedded in them, even in the physical products, to really give you that mark of authenticity and quality. You've got three-dimensional virtual environments where the whole metaverse, that specific one, the way it looks is a trademark. So you know what Fortnite looks like. No one should be copying that. That's their trademark. That's their brand. It's their look and feel. But at the same time, it protects the consumer from not going online, paying a fee to enter a game, which is sort of a imitation Fortnite, right? It's protecting the consumer from engaging with a bank, which is not a legitimate bank or the legitimate bank. I mean, think about how brands and phishing are still the top cybersecurity threat. So just taking a brand and you switch out the O for a C, or the I becomes an L, and so the email address looks the same or the domain looks the same, and you get an email with a footer or a banner that looks legitimate, that is still the top way of defrauding people online. And so brands have evolved from just being a marking saying, this is my product and I honor the promise. It's become a form of cybersecurity in a way. So a lot of the work I do with the International Trademark Association, it's called INTA for short, is on their internet committee. We've started a group that literally just advocates for brand owners and people in the brand IP profession, so lawyers and advisors and so on, to be represented on internet governance forums, because to date they are not there. And if you think about the digital world, that is where brands exist. It's your shop, your website is your shop front. Your brand is what you look like online, your social media presence, your website, your online user experience, how you view goods, how you try them on, how they delivered, how you pay for them. That's all part of the customer experience, right? And we just think it's crazy that brand owners and brands are not represented currently at the Internet Governance Forum or WSIS or Net Mundial. All these platforms are multi-stakeholder groups, and they're again looking at how they want the internet to be or remain. So is it open? Is it harmonized? Does it follow a certain set of technical standards? There's a lot of internet fragmentation at the moment with different countries, geo-blocking or having their own rules and parameters. And these initiatives that are saying, but what are the principles on which we want to maintain and have the internet we want? That's kind of the underlying theme. And I think it's so powerful. What is the internet you want? What do you want? You want trustworthy, honest information. You don't want fake news and misinformation, right? You don't want to be blocked from accessing certain websites or platforms or news. You don't want to be typecast by your digital fingerprint. You want to be able to learn about others. You certainly don't want to be buying counterfeit goods all the time and scrolling things and getting things that are just, absolute unlawful or, poor quality and just not the brand you thought you were interacting with. Then there's also, obviously, the fraud, the imitation and impersonalization of brands. So this is when we get to phishing and cybersecurity issues. And then there is vulnerable groups, children, for example, on social media or interacting with online spaces or brands or figures. And we think brands and brand IP professionals have a role that they can play in curbing this and ensuring the internet stays honest and accessible and doesn't sort of manipulate society in bad ways.
And in terms of, for example, generative AI, what implications will this have on consumers in the foreseeable future?
I think that remains for everyone to be seen. My worry is that generative AI, firstly, is doing all the fun things. We're still going to have to do all the physically unpleasant things like, stop a leak in your roof when it rains. But the AI is creating art and music and, taking that from humans. The bigger problem I see is at the moment you still have humans who can look at the AI, what it's produced, and question it. Or say, this is not accurate, or this is not actually true. And the reason for that is they are, in their professions, they've gone through the learning stages. So they've done the repetitive work that trains your brain to be able to do your job very well. But now we've got a generation who have these tools from day one, and you are not being taught to analyze the output. You're not being taught to understand what went into that output. You don't know the database it was trained on. You don't know the motives or who owns the AI. You're not being taught that. So we're going to have to make a leap from training people to execute tasks to training them to use the AI tool and still have the same level of judgment and expertise as people who are seasoned in a specific craft, not just rely on the tool. So I know in health, in hospitals and that sort of thing, AI has a big role in diagnostics, in prescribing medicine and quantities and supply chain and all of that. But it's being used by doctors with experience of having done that themselves. So when something doesn't look right, they'll say that's not right. We can coach the AI. But if you fast forward 20, 30 years from now, you'll have doctors, car mechanics, lawyers, people who've not honed that skill. They have not diagnosed people without using an AI tool. And I think that's a bit dangerous. I think if you are coaching people out of being able to do a job, it's a bit dangerous to be over-reliant on these tools. They are not solutions, they are tools. And in order to use a tool, you still need the skill yourself. So,
do you think that one day it can become a solution and not just a tool?
Absolutely. The way it seems to be evolving, that's what it seems like. But if you want to leave all the decision-making and all the skills, if you don't want to still exercise a certain level of agency in your profession or in your life and just leave it up to the tool, I think that's a very dangerous state of being, just for humanity in general.
Christine, this last part of the podcast is called the fast fire. So I'm just going to ask you questions. And if you could answer in a word or a sentence, that would be perfect. First question is, what changes would you like to see in IP law to better support businesses in Africa?
No exchange control restrictions.
Okay, could you clarify that?
A big impediment to startups in South Africa and some other African countries is that you cannot offshore your IP to an investor or a funder without getting Reserve Bank approval. And it makes investors look the other way. And I think this has been an incredible impediment to growing scalable businesses in South Africa.
Okay, that's a goodie. If you could share one piece of advice to early stage founders from a legal perspective, what would it be?
Diversify. I think it's high risk to invest in only one product or one sales avenue.
Okay.
Through difficult times, we've often had different parts of the business thrive. And so I think even big tech companies at the moment have publicly stated that they've survived certain economic challenges or changes in the market because they were diversified sufficiently.
Okay. And just to add to this, or maybe a follow-up question, is just purely from a revenue point of view? So diversify your revenue streams?
Not necessarily. If you look at our business, all the revenue is from IP work.
Okay.
But within the business, there are very different kinds of IP offerings or work products being delivered. And sometimes when the one does great, the other one has, a quiet time. They kind of balance each other out. In a more extreme form, I think, Virgin recently said that they basically survived the last 5 years because some of their business sections had to carry the hospitality and air travel. So that's a much more extreme diversification. But I think it's just high risk to invest in only one offering. So you can have the same product or the same technology, but see if there are not different markets and different avenues that could support your business and sustain it. regardless of macroeconomic conditions.
Yeah, definitely. Got it. Makes sense. What's one skill you wish you learned in your 20s?
There's too many. There's no quick fire answer there. I think I wish I learned to relax, balance, and really being in the moment is actually much better than rushing through your life. So I now have a saying that says, I want a life that's rich, not rushed. And I know this is not quick fire. Can I just tell you a quick story that has just profoundly impacted me in the recent months? And people probably know this quote, but they were talking to a very famous investor, and he said, I do a lot of reading and thinking, and it's helped me make fewer impulsive decisions. So it's meant that I've been more successful at business. The person is Warren Buffett, so you have to admire, how he's gone about building his business. And then he said something that really just changed how I look at my professional life. He said, doing that has given him an advantage in his profession. He said, but mostly I do it because I like this kind of life. And I think for me, a major realization is do it because you like this kind of life. And then regardless of what the outcome is, it was great. The journey is the reward.
That's wise words. Next steps, what's in the pipeline, personally, professionally, in the months and years to come?
So I think we are on a very exciting time in IP. Even in our business, we've brought in a commercialization and transactions unit, and they look specifically at licensing, valuation, ex-con, even social media deals. And that just shows you how IP has become the most prominent aspect of most modern businesses. As you know, your top 100 businesses in the world, a few decades ago, it was all mining, brick and mortar, fuel, oil. Now it's all tech and IP-rich businesses. And so for us, I think it's just continuously building a service offering that meets that new IP environment. And that excites me a lot. I'm very much into NFTs and metaverse and smart contracts and new types of technology and the IP underlying that. So I often tell people I'm not a technology lawyer. I am an IP lawyer that specializes in the tech world. Slight difference. But I'm really excited to watch the IP evolution in that space. And for the business, we just want to continue growing into Africa. We want to be the firm of choice for African IP, African intellectual property for both local businesses, but also for foreign businesses looking to invest in the African market. And that's always been our goal. And I'm quite excited to keep chasing that.
Amazing. Christine, thank you. This is so valuable. Thank you for your insight and your wisdom. And just for everyone who's listening and watching, go back, watch this twice because there's lots of insights and valuable tips at the beginning. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Cool.